Can you start with telling me a bit about yourself and your background? How did you end up in this field?
Yeah, so my name is Tobias. I initially grew up in East Germany when the war was still up. That fundamentally changed a little bit my life when it actually came down. And that also opened up the world for me in general mentally. I ended up living in about 12 countries throughout my career so far. And so I ended up studying international law, international politics, and then that led almost naturally to a stint at the United Nations on violence prevention, political affairs, working with governments around the world. I also realized, wow, tech is growing and it has an increasingly large impact on people's lives, particularly, of course, communications technology, the internet, obviously. So started as a strategic risk manager at Google to really proactively identify new risks, so to prevent harm from users, but also people globally from the misuse of that technology. But also realized then, of course, with the ChatGPT moment and when it was released, that something even newer is happening, something that seemed to tremendously change what AI can do and how humans use AI. And that fascination really drew me, of course, to OpenAI to start a very similar team that focuses really on preventing risks from materializing, from preventing misuse of those technologies to make sure they are secure and safe so that we can develop and roll them out safely, human to AI interaction. There's so much going on, so much complexity, so much to figure out. Yeah, that's why I really love my job. So I really am happy where I landed so far.
One of the reasons why we started this conference is we really do think that the safety and the security of AI, I think, is imperative for its taking its place. So there is also a lot of talk about AGI, but there doesn't seem to be a consensus what people mean with AGI or superintelligence. So what's your view on AGI or superintelligence and how it will change the world?
I think you're absolutely right? There is a lot of diversity on what people think it is. It may be many things, right? That's, I think, a realization that is happening particularly over the last year, that AGI mean a lot of different things, and there may be many AGIs. First of all, I think for me personally, it is a combination of different things. For me, AGI to actually manifest in our lives. I think that's also an important part of it. I think there's, of course, the raw intelligence, scientific discovery that AI can actually help push humanity forward. It's very exciting, like new discoveries in medical fields, in math and physics, in the sciences. And there's also the utility of it. Right? It's even if you have the best raw intelligence, if it can't be interacting and doing things for you, it doesn't seem to be really AGI, right? I think that's what we're seeing recently and this year, particularly around agents and tool use, where it becomes really helpful to you personally and the workers, but also in daily life. And then there's, of course, more and more of bringing AGI to the world. What that does mean is there a physical component to it? Is robotics plays a role here? Safety is really imperative, particularly as we move into more and more agentic systems and more areas where AI or AGI soon, maybe at some point, will take on action for us. The more, of course, we need to make sure that this is all safe and data is handled right, that these systems do what we actually want them to do.
Listen to some of your presentations, and there you actually compared AI with the other industrial revolutions we had a bit, it will become something like an infrastructure or electricity. Or in the AI space right now, we're seeing it a bit more like wild west. Do you think this can be controlled, or should it be controlled?
I mean, I think it also depends a bit where you look like, right? Cloud infrastructure, if you think about it, is pretty much privatized, right? At least in the majority as well. But it depends a little if you see that as a very different infrastructure or not. And this is a very innovation-driven field, right? There is only a limited amount of talent and resources around building these systems. So innovations appears to come mostly from private initiatives, right? I think we've seen that across the board with mostly innovations in general in history. But we are, as you probably have seen, OpenAI is engaging countries. Precisely that reason, we do believe AI is very much like infrastructure. And we need to be working with countries to enable that to happen. And there's a very physical component to it, of course, in terms of compute. And that will often require some kind of engagement with the public sector to actually enable that to happen. because it's very energy intense. It's very intense in terms of land and just the things you need to build this. So I think you're right. There is still a relationship. It's not that private companies can just do this all alone, right? There is definitely a relationship.
So similar to AGI, actually AI security in general, or it's such a new area that there is very little research being done on it. OpenAI are doing research on it, but it means a lot of different thing to different persons. What's your view on AI safety and AI security, and how would you summarize the field in general?
Yeah, it's wide, right? And even exactly finding the difference between security and safety here is even tough, right? And I often joke with my German colleagues here that it actually is the same word in German, right? Even security and safety is exactly the same word. We call it Sicherheit. Traditionally, you would probably see safety more in the space of making the model safe, looking at that it's not being misused, that the model itself is, of course, behaving as it should be, that you don't enable catastrophic risks for misuse, particularly in the biorisks or chemical misuse. That is, of course, very important. Security, I would usually put more in the bucket of securing the models themselves, securing the infrastructure where the model and human interaction takes place. And more, it will grow, particularly as we have just recently talked about ChatGPT agent, for example, where when you connect your data sources to agent, for example, and agentic systems, you also need to make sure that that data stays secure and is now exfiltrated or lands through prompt injections somewhere unsafe. That's a very growing field of investment, of course, and we are working very hard on making sure that these data streams are secure and that people who want to build on it as well can do that safely. Of course, many developers and enterprises use our API, for example, with our models. So we want to also make sure, of course, that this is all secure in terms of a data interaction, particularly and cybersecurity wise.
There's a lot of discussion about physical AI and physical interaction. Everyone seems to agree that there is a revolution where the AI will go from a chat GPT prompt, which is fairly safe if it does something wrong, to actually interactions with the real world. So how do you see the security space there when we're going that route? Where agents being a middle path, I guess.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And I think we are also learning a lot from the self-driving experience where, there's a lot of simulation going on as well. There's multiple steps self-driving car companies take to make sure that their vehicles are secure, because you're suddenly putting a several ton vehicle in traffic. Of course, safety is paramount. And there is almost a zero tolerance for these vehicles in terms of safety. It's even more important, right? But of course, if you have a massive platform like ChatGPT, then even small misalignments can be detrimental because they can hit millions of people. So we take that responsibility very seriously, and our CEO is constantly talking about how we need to make sure that we roll these out safely and securely. And there is really a life cycle across this, right? It's from pre-training, you're selecting the right data, over then model specs and telling the model how to behave and model policies, post-training exercises, red teaming, stress testing, before a model even goes out into the world. That's why we also publish very, very openly about what kind of threat actors we are seeing, on how misuses are happening. And we will continue to do so because we want to share that with the ecosystem as well, so that others can benefit from it as well, including developers, but other labs and governments, of course, as well.
In the last year or so, there has been a shift from really large models to really small models, which will fit on a device. And there has been a lot of open source models published, which maybe haven't had a lot of safety training. They just been very basically trained in very small models. Now, OpenAI just yesterday, they actually published their own open source models. And it seems to me, just after 24 hours of actually being able to test them, that there has been a good way of actually securing quite small models as well. So how did OpenAI succeed in securing such a small model?
Absolutely. We take this incredibly seriously. It's precisely for the reason that once an open weights model is shared with the world, that's it, right? And then one cannot really control how it's being used anymore. So, and it can be forked, it can be adapted, it can be fine-tuned upon. So what we did, particularly for this launch, not only go through the regular cycle of safety measures and went ahead even more on that, beyond the type of data we trained it on, for example, but then also making sure that we basically played the devil's advocate here and fine-tuned the worst case model out of it to ensure that even that worst case fine-tuning fits still into our risk framework and doesn't expose humanity to new and unforeseen and catastrophic risks. So we added extra steps to make sure that this open model is not posing any security challenges. And we'll continue to monitor this, of course. It does not stop. We just check this off. No, we'll continue to watch how people are using it and see if future those types of models, if there are additional safety measures that need to happen.
I think this last year, what we've seen is AI has really taken a leap is in code generation. Me, myself, I don't code without an AI anymore. And I think most software developers are now using 2 or 3 AI agent tools to help them every day. Where do you see the next step where AI can take such a leap? Because this has been an incredible leap.
Yes, absolutely. We call it a bit the year of agents. Not surprisingly, have of course a product that's called ChatGPT Agent, and you can already see where it's a little bit going, right? The ChatGPT Agent can use a bunch of tools, right? Those sources of tools will of course increase and will be able to use even more things. You see that agent can produce files for you already, like slides or documents even. So it'll be more and more natively integrated in systems, but also as your companion in the workforce, right? To do some of the work for you. I think that's the key here. And it's probably not a secret at all, but there's a lot of excitement, of course, in Silicon Valley around robotics. And there's a lot of investment going in that field. It's clear that this is definitely one of the next fields that folks are trying to figure out using LLMs and particularly vision models to help these robots navigate almost independently in new spaces. And then, the applications are almost endless. And for agents as well, that's the beauty. If you can teach a model to use tools, then it's almost endless opportunity, right? Endless space folks can venture into and figure out new amazing use cases. It's very exciting.
So looking ahead where we are now, what's the one thing that worries you, and what's the one development recently that actually gives you hope for the AI revolution?
Absolutely. I mean, I wouldn't be a good risk manager if I wouldn't worry, right? And that is, of course, one of my jobs, to think about what could go wrong and then figure out, okay, how we make that not go wrong, right? And what do we do against that happening? And that's why I listen to any concerns that folks are putting out there and figure out, okay, is this real, and how close is this potentially from a capability standpoint? What do we need to do to actually watch a new risk emerge? So that we're not surprised. That's kind of the key part of my jobs and my team, to make sure that we are ahead of that. Of course, it's also not a surprise, right? The folks are, of course, concerned that what we call catastrophic risk could materialize. This is particularly around the misuse of biological capabilities, chemical capabilities. There's a big focus of ours at OpenAI to make sure that biorisks are mitigated and that we don't unleash capabilities to the wrong hands in the world, so that we stop that from happening. But the upside of AI development here is that capability gains also help us in the safety sphere. We have published a few months ago on deliberative alignment, which is a technique that teaches the model in its chain of thought to be more safe and adherent to its own principles that we set it for. So the AI capability advancements also give us new tools to make sure that they are safe. So that's the great part about research and safety research, particularly, that new capabilities can also help you do new things in the safety space. So that always gives me hope.
Okay, thank you very much, Tobias.